Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. I have been wanting to do an idea that I have seen a couple of other people do as part of a mid-year review of my reading year. So the idea that I saw that I really liked is going through each month of the year and picking the best book from that month to talk to you about, and then also seeing what the worst book that I read that month was. And the reason that I find this idea fun and interesting is the same reason that other creators like Cassidy and Mel mentioned in their videos, is that this is not necessarily like your favorite book of the year, because you could have a month where you don't read a book that dethrones any of your favorites so far, but you still had like a best book of that month, so maybe it deserves some recognition. And then the unfortunate thing for the first half of my year is that I've had a few DNFs too, so we do definitely have a few worst books to talk about. But I'm gonna go month by month, and I'm going to tell you what my best book of that month was and what my worst book of that month was, obviously starting with January. So I think that just in the interest of ending on a positive note, always ending on a positive note, I am gonna start with worst and then do best for each month. So this is actually a really funny starting point, because I'm gonna sound like a hater when January was one of the best reading months of the entire year. So technically my worst book from the month of January was actually Fourth Wing, but I gave Fourth Wing 4 stars. It's just that I read like 5 books in January, and a 4-star was my lowest rating of the entire month, which is a great thing for me, because that means that there were actually no bad books in the month of January. But the other ones that I read, I loved more than this. Fourth Wing was a lot of fun. I did have some mini rants and inconsistencies with like the world building, but for the most part, I was truly able to put those aside and just enjoy my time with this. And obviously a 4-star reflects the fact that it wasn't a perfect book for me, but it was a ton of fun. My best/favorite book that I read in January and still holds up as one of my favorite books of the year so far is Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jędrzejewski, and this is a book set in 1980s Poland in the kind of communist landscape of that country at the time, and it follows a young boy and another boy that he meets. They are like university age, but they have their summer and they're going to like this work camp, and that's where they meet. And it's something that like they have to do, like, as, I don't know, I mean, a kind word for it would be like a co-op, but I don't think that's really what it is. But they meet there and they kind of strike up this secret relationship where our main character is very interested in being a part of this relationship publicly, whereas the boy that he is falling for is not really interested in like a public relationship. Like, he lives like sort of a different kind of life under this regime, and this follows the two of them as their relationship progresses and the like kind of emotional implications of it and how it unfurls, with one of them not really willing to be openly gay in a like under a government that can, if they choose to, punish you for being out. And this is really well written. I loved the author's writing style, and I will definitely be looking for other things by this author. So this was just like fantastic. This was Ben's recommendation, so shout out to him. And I loved this thoroughly. Next up, obviously, is February, and the worst book that I read in February, we actually relegated to our, like, away from our main shelves because we didn't want it on there, and that is The Wolf by Leo Carew. And this is the first book in a trilogy that I was intrigued by. It is based on, like, the island of Britain. Like, it's very clear when you read the book that the geography is based on like the British Isles, and it takes like a historical take on it, but you also have like non-human races in the mix as well. And I didn't jive with the writing style at first, but then things got slightly more interesting and I thought I was going to give it a shot, but then I think I made it around 100 pages in. I don't remember exactly how far in I made it, but I just had this sudden realization that I was like, why am I reading this? Because I wasn't actually liking it or caring very much. Which is a disappointment because I had thought that I would like The Wolf, but I really didn't. So this never got a rating from me. I don't rate my DNFs, but it does take the crown as my least favorite book that I read in the month of February. However, we have that balanced out by two favorites and best books of February that I want to recognize because they are so different from one another that I feel like I would be remiss to not mention both of them, because one of them is like a fairly new release fantasy and the other one is just like a classic. So the absolute classic is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. And this is a book that me and Ben read as part of like a small informal book club with his old housemates and one of their girlfriends. And this was just like a delightful book. I have never read from Diana Wynne Jones before, and I'm not also familiar with the story of Howl's Moving Castle. Like, I have never watched it either. I just kind of knew that it was beloved, and I can see why. Because it is so, like, it is cozy, but it doesn't just have the cozy vibe throughout. Like, you root for your main character, Sophie, and she has like, I don't know, she has like a tough upbringing, like tough times, and then she gets cursed, and then she meets Howl and his moving castle, and everything is very whimsical, but there is also a darkness to it that I think is balanced really well. And if I have said it before, I'll say it again. Like, I love something that balances the whimsy and the fantasy aspects with the darkness well. It's one of my favorite things when I find that perfect balance in a book. So I really did love this. And then we have Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong as the other fantastic 5-star book that I read in February. And this was one, again, that Ben read before me, and he loves it too. So that was what prompted me to pick it up probably sooner than I otherwise would have, because I was interested in it, but I've been known to put things off. So I'm really glad that I read this one sooner rather than later. So in this book, we have our main characters who come from very different backgrounds. We have the first point of view that we get in the book is from a man who is a member of a tribe that live outside of this sort of like oasis utopian city, and they always try to cross the wastes to gain access to this city, but it's a very dangerous thing to do, and a lot of people die from the blight, or what they call the blight, as they try and make this crossing. But some people do make it, and our other main character is a scholar, Siona, who lives inside of the city. And she is someone who has a different kind of set of challenges facing her in her life, where she is a female scholar and a female like magic user, where they have never let a female magic user onto the like High Council. I can't remember if that's the actual official name for it, but it's like the Council of the High Mages. And every like 10 years, I think, or every year or something, very infrequently they will let a woman test for it, but they have never yet actually allowed a woman into it. And she is looking to break down those barriers, and she is discriminated against for her gender. But our other main character, what is his name again? Tomil, yes. I was like, it's not Thomas, but it's something like that. Our other main character, Tomil, is completely like discriminated against in a different way because he is viewed as an immigrant and an outsider come to the city, and they both face their own challenges, where it's clear that Siona is more privileged than Tomil, but it's undeniable that she is still discriminated against in different ways. And there's a lot more to this story, but a lot of the theme work is fantastic because it totally talks about intersectionality and how you have to be able to recognize the challenges that people face that are different from yours, and how that impacts like the way they're treated and the way their lives have gone, the trajectory of their lives, where you may not even realize you might be so inwardly focused on what impacts you that you are not able to recognize that you have privileges that other people don't have because of the like groups that they are a part of that might compound like the discrimination that they face. And so there's a lot of that, obviously, but this also has an extremely cool and interesting magic system that fits the story so well, and what ML Wong did with it was like genius, and how she threaded everything together. Extremely interesting. And she also like pulled through to the end with like the full extension of her plot. Like she didn't back away from the full implications of what she was writing. It really it really packed a punch at the end. So I really liked how she built this story and how she executed it and saw it through. It was fantastic. So this is an easy recommendation for like pretty much any fantasy fan. Next up in March, I actually have 2 worst books to mention. So we've gone from 2 best books to 2 worst books. And I actually don't have either of them physically at the moment, because one of them I gave to a friend that I thought would like it more, and the other it was a book that I had gotten from Value Village in the first place, and we just put it in one of the little free libraries in our neighborhood. But the first book, which I guess would technically be my least favorite because I didn't even finish it, but that was Quicksilver by Callie Hart, which unfortunately just didn't work for me. It was one of the new romanticies that I was excited about. I thought the cover of it was really nice too. It just like seemed like everybody was so excited about it and raving about it that I would have so much fun. But at first I was like, okay, the writing isn't really giving me a connection to the characters, but I was interested to wait until like our main character met the love interest, see what the vibes were like between them. But then we met the love interest and I still wasn't really interested. And then as we got a little bit further into that, I realized that I really didn't like him. And I had heard like a focal point of the book for a lot of people was that they really liked him and they really liked, you know, like the banter and the beginnings of the relationship and stuff. So it was at that point where I was like, okay, if I really don't like him and I don't like the writing, then I really just think that this isn't going to be the book for me. And Quicksilver is fairly long too. So I was like, I would be doing the book a disservice if I put myself all the way through this and I gave it like a poor rating, whatever that would have been. It was not going well for me, unfortunately. So I did give that one to a friend. And then the other book that I read in March that I was not the biggest fan of was The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. And honestly, I have given Lucy Foley, I think 4 stars and like 3.5 stars, but this one was like a 2-star for me. And it was just very forgettable. Like, I read it quite quickly because I will give it that. It's easy to read. She writes a good thriller that like paces you through it, and I was able to finish it with no issues, and it was fine, but it was just extremely forgettable. Even now, I couldn't really tell you the character's name. I think that her brother's name, the one that owned or was living in the apartment, was named Ben, and the only reason that I remember that is because his name was Ben. So yeah, like it wasn't a terrible book by any means. It was just so standard thriller feeling for me. It just didn't really do anything special. However, March did have one of the best books of the year so far, and that is The Bone Hunters by Steven Erikson, which is definitely my favorite Malazan book that I have read this year. Memories of Ice is still like a favorite Malazan book for me, but Bone Hunters is up there with it, and then like Told the Hounds was amazing too. But to the point in the year where I had read this, I would say that The Bone Hunters was my favorite book of the year, and it is an insane and incredible entry in the Malazan series. There are so many things in this book, like you can't talk about them being brief. But yeah, The Bone Hunters is one that I was looking forward to because I had heard good things about it from people and it fully met every expectation. My review on Goodreads of this was literally just that it's 11 out of 10. I loved this so much. Now, in April, we unfortunately had one of my most disappointing books of the year as my least favorite of the month. And this one I also don't have physically, but that is just because I was reading an electronic arc of it, so I never actually had it physically. And I'm unsure if we will ever buy it. I think it probably depends on whether Ben ends up reading it and liking it. No pressure, but this is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So this is probably a prime example of why sometimes I am hesitant to like commit to everything by an author or everything by a creator, which is a me problem, but it is a me problem that I am sometimes unfortunately vindicated in, because in my mind, like, everybody was really excited for The Devils and so was I, but it was also very different from like First Law, and I'm fully like, okay, just because I loved First Law, it doesn't mean that I'm going to love when an author does something very different. Like, yes, they are still them, so the way they do it could be like the through contributing factor here, but if it's a very different story, just because it's them writing it doesn't mean I'm going to like it. And that's unfortunately what happened with The Devils, because it just didn't appeal to me at all. Like, I could see obviously that it's still an Abercrombie book. It had those aspects, but he took parts of his humor that would be my least favorite parts and turned them up to 11. And the more dry humor, the stuff that I would like a lot more, it didn't feel as present in this book as it did in his other books. And it was also a lot more fast-paced, this one. It throws you right in, and it moves at a pretty breakneck pace from the start until about a third of the way in when I DNF'd it. And it also has like some pretty juvenile jokes, which just don't normally land for me as my type of humor. It usually takes me out of it, if anything, and it made me feel like nothing was being taken seriously. So in the end, like, I wasn't taking it seriously, I wasn't invested. I didn't really like any of the characters on a deep enough level to really care to continue reading. And that was what ended up happening, because this was one of my most anticipated books of the year because it was Abercrombie. So on the flip side of that, it is one of my most disappointing books of the year because I never expected really to not like it, and especially not to like it so much that I didn't even finish it. But the other book that I will talk about for April, my favorite book of the month, was one of my other most anticipated reads of the year. So at least something was coming through for me, which was Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey, which ironically enough is an example of an author that writes standalone works. So every time I read a new book from her, it is something different. But she does have a certain style and substance to her books that are pretty consistent throughout. She writes what I consider to be climate fiction, so it is always focused on something to do with the environment in one sense or another. She does like focus her stories and her settings on a world that is like slightly near future, although it could just be the present since the world is not looking fantastic right now. But in this case, we have a family that lives on a very remote island, south, like basically between Australia and Antarctica. It's very, very far from any other things. They are sort of like the caretakers of this island, and they were living on it alongside like a scientific laboratory and a seed bank, which was essentially a vault of protected seeds from around the world, so that when landscapes and forests and whatever have you are destroyed by whether it's fires or floods, like there is a representation of seeds and plants and like agriculture and stuff from around these places so that they can be replenished. But the issue is that the problems with the climate have even reached so far as to this island where they thought they would have a lot longer of stable climate conditions. So it's not safe to keep the seeds here anymore, and they have to move them. And the scientists have left for the most part, and it's pretty much just this family living here, and they are tasked with taking some of the final seeds off of the island when they leave. And there is a woman that has come in search of her husband that lived at the scientific research base and lab, and she doesn't know where he is because she lost contact with him, but he is no longer on the island, and there's definitely a little bit more to this story. People are hiding things, but she arrives on the island looking for him, but essentially just finds this family of a father and his 3 children and doesn't really know what to make of it, and they really don't know what to make of her, but they are the only people there and they can't really leave her alone to the elements. So relationships are built out of necessity, and things kind of unfurl from there. They progress. And this book was really rude. This book made me cry a lot, but I did absolutely adore it. And I'm glad that Charlotte McConaughey wrote another hit for me. All right, it is time for the books that I read in May. So my least favorite book that I read in the month of May is once again a book that I do not have a physical copy of, but this one, it's because I read it on Kindle. I purchased the Kindle edition because it was on sale when I looked for it, and I was reading this for a book club with my friends, and we have just been like, we've each been putting forth our options and doing a spinner wheel, and whoever wins, like whatever book wins, is the one that we read. And so this one was Variation by Rebecca Yarros, and I gave this 2.75 stars. This was not a terrible book by any means. It did have a little bit of melodrama. It had the like the plot beats of like a dramatic romantic movie, like kind of like a sad drama romance with like a bit of upside. Like, I don't know, I guess just a drama, but this is a romance. This is the story of a man and a woman who, back when they were like around 16, like boy and girl, they met because they both kind of had like family homes on the coast of, I think it's Cape Cod, and they run in very different circles. They met because the boy Hudson was saving Allie and her sister from like a leaky boat, and he goes on to become like a Coast Guard rescuer. But Allie and her sister come from a very prestigious family. Their mother was like a prima ballerina, and they were extremely elite dancers. And so Allie goes on to be like an extremely elite dancer, and their family has more of like a vacation home in that area. Like, they don't actually live there. They were not really meant to associate with the like underlings. Like, at least that's the way their parents would see it. Their parents were very like snobby and didn't want them associating with like the regular townspeople. However, they couldn't stop a friendship from forming between the two of them. But like when they were around 18, they went their separate ways to start their careers. But when she has a catastrophic injury on stage, she goes back home to this vacation home to like rest and recover and rehab her injury, and runs into Hudson again. And things kind of spark up again. And then Hudson's niece is involved because she wants to be a dancer, but her mom doesn't want her to be a dancer because she never liked the girls from this family. She grew up with them, and she doesn't want her daughter to become like that. And so it is a romance. We have a little bit of fake dating in there. We hit the story beats that are kind of associated with that. And so it was entertaining, but that's all it was. Like, I could see watching this as a movie and then kind of forgetting about it afterwards. And I would be like, okay, yeah, that was a decent way to spend my time for a few hours, but then I just didn't think about it anymore. So this was a very like vaguely enjoyable, okay book for me. And then for my best book in the month of May, I actually have a nonfiction book, and that is Blood, the Science, Medicine, and Mythology of Menstruation by Dr. Jen Gunter. And this was something that I have wanted to, I wouldn't say like I've wanted to read this book for a while, because this was kind of what I found when I was looking at this topic in the store, but I have wanted to read more about this topic for a while, so this book fit perfectly into that for me, and I really appreciated the approach that the author took. I love that she is a practicing OB-GYN writing this, and she infuses a lot of like practical knowledge and applicable knowledge of what she does into her writing and into the book as well. But I just love the like anti-sensationalized message of this, where it breaks it down in what I consider to be an accessible way. And it kind of tells you about menstruation, but then it also tells you about a lot of things adjacent to that as well. Like it touches on products that are pushed towards us because like menstruation has historically been considered unclean and dirty and something to be ashamed of, and so a lot of products are pushed on women that are meant to like clean you up, like this is how you like prevent parts of the, like this is how you make it smaller and make it so that nobody can see it, and stuff like that. And some of these are actually actively harmful to you. Like they're not just neutral, you could choose to either use them or not. Some of them are actually harmful to us. It touches on contraceptives, it touches on like hormonal birth control, IUDs, like a lot of different facts and studies and like pros and cons of different birth controls. And I just really like how it lays a lot of information out while always knowing that the end goal is that it's going to be the individual person's decision. She didn't write this book going into it telling you what to think or what to do, but is giving important information so that you can know the benefits of certain things, but also the risks that are going to be associated with different things. No matter what you choose, it's not going to be perfect. Everything has risks, but it's going to be up to the individual person who has a period to decide what's going to be best for them. And so it's not only the facts and knowledge that are in this book, but it's mainly that approach that was what made me really love reading this and want to recommend it to other people. Next up, we've got the books that I read in June, and unfortunately, the least favorite book / worst book that I read in June was also the book club pick for me and my friends, but I swear I'm not a hater because this one was actually my own pick. Maybe I'm still a hater. I'm just not like hating on my friends' books for no reason. You know what I mean? So this was Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill, and this was a bit of a sad one because I thought that this was going to be really cute and cozy and like the type of cozy fantasy that I'm into, but it just didn't, like, something about it didn't tick the boxes for me. So this is about a small village that's on the edge of a lake, and a woman who is accused of being a witch and thrown into the lake by her village, and she is saved by Jenny Greenteeth, the Jenny that lives in this lake. And they kind of form a relationship, and they realize that there is a sinister force that has infiltrated its way into the town, which is why they have so suddenly turned on the witch, because she does have magic, but she didn't parade it around before, but this new kind of presence in the town was purposely casting suspicion on her and getting people to turn on her, and so they want to push back and they want to like oust this darkness and this dark force from her town, but they realize that they're going to need some help because this is a little bit beyond their abilities. So I think that the problem with this one was that based on the blurb, it really only mentions Temperance being thrown into the lake and Jenny saving her and them going on some sort of quest, which I realized in hindsight was actually quite vague. And I was able to kind of put whatever I was hoping into there as that quest. But once we got there and they were actually going on the quest, this ended up being a bit more of a fairy book than I was expecting, which is not a bad thing because I have really enjoyed other fae and fairy books, but there was something about the pacing of this, something about the writing and the characters where the whole kind of combination together wasn't completely grabbing my attention. And so this was good. Like, it wasn't bad, but I came away from it just feeling so average about it. And I don't even remember what I rated it anymore. I think I may have given it 3 stars right on the dot because I felt like it did a lot of things well, and I think that it used the mythology well, and I didn't have like an issue with it, but I was disappointed because I thought this was going to be like a new cozy favorite, and it just wasn't. But I have 2 favorite reads to talk about in June, and this is another instance of them just being so absolutely different from each other that I have to mention both of them. So this is more than enough to make up for one average read. So the first one that I want to talk about is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. I feel like this book came in like an absolute wrecking ball because once Ben read it and recommended it, and like I started reading it, like everybody in our Discord started reading it and everybody was loving it, and Ben had loved it first and then I read it after him, but like he picked this up from the bookstore because he had seen it recommended and I hadn't even seen anything about it at that point. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably interested in that. But then like the level to which Ben loved it made me be like, okay, actually, I'm gonna read this immediately. And I was so sucked in. So we have our main character, Nima Kra, in this book. And in this book, we have a sort of like a religious setup where there is an emperor, and every like 24 years, I believe, the emperor kind of like peacefully steps down. Like that is the length of the reign of an emperor, and everybody recognizes that. But when it's time for the emperor to step down, each of the like houses is represented by an animal, and each of these animals has a champion, like a contestant, that gets put through a set of trials, and the winner becomes the new emperor. So we are currently in that time period in the current day, but we also have some events that take place at the beginning of the book that give some context to everything, where there is something that happened like about 10-ish years in the past that was like a rebellion that was put down, and there was a girl who was exiled as a result of that. So basically there are some intricacies to this plot that have already we already have the knowledge of before we start this present day timeline, but there is even more drama that's about to take place because very close to the opening ceremonies of these trials, where all of the competitors for the throne are in place, a murder takes place that changes everything, and it needs to be solved. And the person who is chosen to solve this mystery is our like scribe scholar main character, Nima. And she is put in charge of the investigation and of solving this mystery. But all the while, these trials are still going on, and all the intricate like politicking and maneuvering of the court is still going on. And this is, it's not like a breakneck speed book. Like there are some moments where we get to slow down, but this is paced super well, where I feel like you just don't want to stop reading it. It feels very propulsive, and it is extremely creative, and it feels very fresh. Like it takes a lot of tropes that you would see in like Game of Thrones and like Hunger Games, and it's doing them in a different way, and it's doing them well, and it's kind of giving you a lot of vibes that you get from separate other fantasy series, and doing a really good job of packaging them into this one book. So this was so good, and this is just like something that I'll be recommending to everybody right now. Now, based on that, I bet you can guess exactly what the other book is, which is Persuasion by Jane Austen. That's the same. But This is my second read through of Persuasion, and the thing that kind of tickled me about reading it this time is that the last time, the ages aren't exactly right, but the last time I read this, I was close-ish to the age of the main character in this book when they are in their younger years. And reading it now, I'm pretty close to the age that they are in the present day in this book, in their second chance romance era. So I thought that was interesting because it's a little firsthand taste of how your life can change and how your perspective can change, and your like physical and emotional and mental situation in your life can change a lot over the period of like 8 years. I think it's been 6 years between me reading it, but still, that was a little bit extra interesting, like another layer of the book for me. But I absolutely adored this on the second read. Like, I liked it on the first read, but I adored it this time. I definitely think that Anne is one of my favorite Jane Austen characters. She's honestly just like a delight to read from, and everyone around her, well, it definitely has the light and funny social commentary of a Jane Austen book, but mostly the ridiculous one in this book, ridiculous ones, are Anne's sisters. There are definitely some other people in this novel that are genuinely good companions and friends, and I think that that's what really elevates it, is that there are some good people. Like, they're not surrounded by people who are unpleasant to be around, which I know is sometimes the case. Like, sometimes in Pride and Prejudice that seems like the case, but I really, of course, Anne's father is ridiculous too, but I just really, really love Anne and her composure and her kindness and her gentle spirit. And I just think that she deserved the happiness of being with Captain Wentworth so much after all of these years, and he is a great love interest too. And it's so hard to talk about this in terms of like what happens, because that's not really the point. It's mostly just people going to each other's houses, as that one review of Jane Austen would put it. I still think that's like the funniest thing ever, but it's the characters and it's the way that Jane Austen writes their emotions in this book. And yeah, I loved it so much. It's more of a gentle, soft, glowy love than it is like a loud in-your-face one, but that's how I feel about Persuasion. And then last but not least, I will try to be brief, but I am filming this at the end of July, so I did want to include July in this list as well. So my least favorite book that I read in the month of July is unfortunately from an author that I used to consider to be a favorite of mine. And he still has some books that are favorites of mine, but I think overall as an author, I don't consider him that way. And that is the new release from Frederick Bachman, which is My Friends. So back a while ago, like, I read Beartown and I read And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, and both of those are favorites for me from him. And then I read Anxious People, and Anxious People was solid. I think I gave it 4 stars, but unfortunately My Friends just really didn't work for me, and I think it was because it felt like he wanted every line of the book to be like a home run, like quotable, like emotionally jarring, and like he wanted you to cry at every line. It made it feel very disjointed. It made it feel like that's not the real way that like conversations go. And I wished that it was more just prose in between, like we get to sit in the moments with the characters instead of every line having to be like a Tumblr quote. And that was just how it felt to me. It felt like he was trying very hard. And I didn't like one of the main characters. I found them to be, actually this applies to more than just one character, but I found them to be like a little bit loud and obnoxious, but also having that like quotable energy where it didn't fit for me into the image of a character. It was hard to reconcile, so I ended up just feeling like they were just this disjointed character. This was a tough one for me because I really wish I liked it more than I did. But the funny thing about Bachman is that I still teared up a couple of times during this book. Like, he still does get me. He does have a talent for like catching fire with some beautiful writing, but it was too much all the time. You can't have like a gut punch or like an impactful line every single line. So that unfortunately just didn't work out for me. But then the best book that I read in July was Toll the Hounds, the 8th book in Malazan by Stephen Erickson. So I am chugging away at this series. I am very proud of myself for my progress on it. And this book was a little different from a lot of the other entries. It was, for quite a bit of it, quite slow, or like slower. But then it has an absolutely crazy convergence at the end and an absolute gut punch. Like, this book was very mean to me at the end, and there were a bunch of times where I was mad, but I was mad because I was so invested in the characters. Like, I'm mad and sad and upset because bad things are happening to people that I absolutely do not want to see these bad things happen to, but the world is just not fair in this book. But this is an interesting one because it does follow a bit of a different tack than a lot of the other books, but it ended up like it all worked out in the end. I wasn't sure if this was going to be as good for me as some of the other books in the series, but the pretty much last half convinced me that it was. And it wasn't that I disliked the first half, it was just that I worried about where we were going. And it turned out that I did love where we were going. So those are all of my favorite and least favorite books of every single month of this year so far. I hope you find this to be an interesting video concept because I thought that it was fun to pick them and fun to kind of look back on the months like this in a bit of a different way. And I am glad that I kind of reviewed these favorites because obviously the worst books, I don't love rehashing those, but I absolutely do love rehashing and talking about the books that I loved and the books that were my favorites. So thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you liked this video. As always, I will have my Discord with Ben and socials linked down in the description if you're interested in any of that stuff. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!